Hey guys, today we're going to take a little break from the V10 Continental content, and instead I'm going to show you the progress I've made on the project I showed in the channel about 2 years ago, my 1997 Lincoln Mark 8. I picked this car up a couple of years ago for $1,000 running and driving. I wanted something cheap and fun to take to the track, to the strip, or just simply beat on. A 240 or a 3 Series BMW just felt too predictable and at this point, way too overpriced. That's when I saw this on Craigslist. And if you didn't know much about this car, it's got a lot of good backbones to make a fun car. Rear-wheel drive, 2-door, independent rear suspension, and it's got that 4.6 dual overhead cam V8 that was later used in the Mustang Cobras. Besides the horrible exterior condition of my car, there's a couple of things that make the Lincoln Mark 8 a less preferred enthusiast choice. First off, these cars only came with automatic transmission. That had to go. So I swapped the MT82 6-speed transmission from a Mustang into this thing, which, this being a mod motor, it bolted right up using a Mustang clutch, flat wheel, and a set of modified pedals. Second is the suspension. This car came from the factory with air suspension all around. It's great if you want to go cruising, probably not ideal if you're trying to drift around a corner. A lot of people switch the air suspension for coil springs. This car already had that when I bought it, broken naturally, so I decided to drop the rear suspension, drop the rear subframe, and replace it with coilovers, and all the worn out bushings were swapped over with polyurethane. Then came the diff. These came open from the factory, and aftermarket options are just way too expensive. So I did a little bit of research and found a way to stick an Explorer LSD into this thing along with 373 gears, so this thing should be ready to lay down some 11s. Now that was all 4 to 5 years ago. Since then, I've done the front suspension, I've done wheels, tires, brakes, and now it's finally all done and ready to go back on the road. But before I show you the final result, let's rewind back 2 years to the beginning of the front suspension work. Now, quick disclaimer, I recorded this video over the past 2 years with my iPhone, so there may be some areas where the quality is a little bit shoddy, but hopefully you still are able to enjoy the video. Last time I had the Mark 8 on the channel, I had just finished the rear coilover conversion. In this video, I'm going to get to install the front coilovers. I'm also going to be refreshing all the control arm bushings and ball joints. And then I'm finally going to get to install the brake kit I've had for a very long time. So I'm really excited about that. So here's the plan for the front coilovers. I have a set of QA1 single adjustable coilovers. I've removed the coil strut assembly from the vehicle already. These are the ones that came with the car when I bought it. I was able to very easily use these mounts as templates to convert the eyelet style QA1 coilovers to fit on the Mark 8. And this is where having a 3D printer really comes in handy. Within a day of designing the parts, I was able to 3D print them out of plastic for test fitment. And here they are. This is the top mount. So this is mounted directly onto the shock tower using the 3 bolts like it does from the factory. So the eyelet from the QA1 coilover will just slide right in, and there's still plenty of room for articulation. For the other end, the Mark 8 lower control arm has a bushing in it, so the rod end in the coilover is a no-go. Fortunately, this is threaded on one end, so I was able to remove it from the coilover and design the mount to replace it. So on one end, this is threaded, this will bolt right into the coilover, and then on the other side, I have a clevis which fits right into the control arm. And the plan is to have both of these machined out of 6061 aluminum. I got a really good deal from a machine shop to get all 4 made. So I'm having them do it. They already have the prints. They already started making it. I should be getting them hopefully by the end of this week. And of course, what kind of car guy would I be if I didn't let the project creep just a little bit? Because the rear, I spent the time and replaced all the bushings and, you know, made all the polyurethane conversion stuff. I didn't want to leave the front hanging, so what I've decided to do is also replace all the bushings. These are all pretty toasted and just old, so I'm going to be pressing these out, cleaning the control arm completely, and then I'm going to be machining my own most likely nylon bushings for these. I'm going to continue taking the rest of the suspension out so I can press these out or burn them out, whatever works best, and then get started on machining the new ones. While not the cleanest way, burning the rubber off is definitely the fastest to get rid of old and tired bushings. You don't believe me? Take a look at what happened to my ball joint pickle fork while trying to take these off the car. That's how rusted and stuck these things were on. This makes quite a bit of a nasty smoke, so remember to do this outside. Trust me, I learned the hard way. Here's another casualty I found as I was taking the front suspension off the car. One of the lower camber bolts was somehow damaged. The camber washer was bent and the bolt had twisted in the washer, so the threads were completely destroyed. I could get a replacement one, but there's no way I'm paying $20 for a bolt, so I'll have to add a trip to the junkyard to my schedule. I got as much of the rubber off as I could, so the next step was to let these cool down before cleaning the rest and pressing the ball joints out, which is made very easy with the use of a press and a couple of old bearings. Alright, so now that I have the control arms cleaned out, for the most part, ball joints pressed out, all the bushings are burnt out, I can move on to machining the bushing. And this is what I'm going to be using for these bushings. This is acetal or Delrin. This is a very stiff plastic, so I'm curious to see what it feels like when I'm going down the road. I used polyurethane in the rear bushings, but since I have a lathe now, I figured let's try and machine it. Let's try and chuck this in the lathe, machine it, and not have to deal with the mess of pouring polyurethane, designing molds, and all that stuff. Before I do that, I need to clean out all this leftover rubber because I have to measure the ID of these holes so I can then machine this to the right diameter. So I got these wire wheels from Harbor Freight. I'm going to take them on a drill and just clean all this out. This part worked surprisingly well. Still messy, but cleaned up the bores really well. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit the wire wheels into smaller bores, so I splurged and got myself a sandblaster to remove the rest of the rubber and strip the entire thing down to bare metal. Sandblasting is a tedious but very rewarding process. You definitely have to take your time, especially with budget setups like this Harbor Freight blaster. But when you get to the end result, it's a very satisfying feeling. The blast media I used was not able to remove the rubber stuck on the walls of the bore, so back to plan A. Only this time, I used the help of an angle grinder to cut the wire wheels down until they fit inside of the bore. Success! Now, with both control arms fully stripped, it was time for a fresh coat of paint to make them look brand spanking new. Alright, so we're back in the garage. I measured all the dimensions I needed to make the bushings. I'm going to go ahead and chuck this on the lathe and get to turning. Now, I've never machined Delrin in the past, but I've heard it was very easy, so I chucked test piece on the lathe and was able to turn down a cylinder from a square very easily. And a plus, because I have so much material left over, I don't actually have to worry about setting this up perfectly. Once I turn this down to a cylinder, it'll be centered with the lathe, and the only thing I have to worry about next is getting a nice finish on the cylinder itself. So let's go ahead and chuck the rest of the material in here and start turning. There it is. A cylinder turned down from a square. That was actually a lot easier than I expected. That thing gets really hot, but it cuts super easily. I can do very deep cuts and the finish is actually very, very nice. So this is definitely going to work. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. I got to turn down a couple more diameters. I got to drill the center hole, cut it off the block, move on to the next. Besides the plastic, I also decided to machine a couple of the inner sleeves since the original ones on one of the control arms rusted pretty badly and were going to be a pain to clean up. Fortunately, I had some metal laying around, so I chucked it on the lathe and began turning some metal sleeves. After a couple of minutes, I had a nice and shiny inner sleeve and the fitment was just perfect. Just listen to this. Alright guys, well I just finished making the sleeves for the second control arm. As you can see, I decided to clean the old bushings out and zinc plate them. The key to zinc plating is simple: sacrificial protection. Zinc corrodes more easily than steel, so when moisture and oxygen get in, the zinc layer reacts first, essentially sacrificing itself to protect the metal underneath. The process used to zinc plate a part is called electroplating. It's a method that uses electricity to transfer metal atoms onto the surface of another metal. Here's how it works. The parts are placed in a special liquid called an electrolyte solution, which contains dissolved zinc ions. Two metal electrodes are submerged in the solution, the anode and the cathode. In this setup, the anode is made of zinc, the cathode is the steel part we want to coat. When electric currents flows through the circuit, zinc atoms at the anode lose electrons, becoming positively charged zinc ions. These ions travel through the solution towards the negatively charged steel cathode. When they reach the surface, they gain electrons and turn back into neutral zinc atoms, forming a thin metal layer on the steel. This process continues as long as current is flowing, slowly building up a protective layer of zinc while the anode gradually dissolves away. Now you don't need an industrial shop to be able to zinc plate your own parts. I did every single bolt and nut of that subframe and suspension right here in my basement. I have a super simple setup. Now it's nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. The plating happens in a 3-gallon bucket filled with a homemade solution of distilled water, white vinegar, and Epsom salt. For the anode, I bought this roll of pure zinc off of Amazon. So all I do is tear a couple strips off and tie them together to make sure I have full coverage on the part. Now the key here is the adjustable power supply. You need to be able to adjust current depending on the part you have in there, so don't skip on that. And you simply take your clean part, drop it in the bucket, and hook up your negative lead to the part. Adjust the settings to what you need, and let the zinc plating do its job. After a few minutes, you pull the part out. Now it's properly zinc plated. Now this is now properly zinc plated, but if you want to have that cool yellow finish that you see on a lot of zinc plated bolts, you got to go an extra step. And this is why I have this second bucket. This is actually filled with a yellow chromate solution. So you take your part and you dip it in there for a couple of seconds. And there you have it, a fully zinc plated part, and now it's got a yellow chromate coating, which honestly just looks better, and it adds an extra layer of corrosion protection. Whew, this heat. Man, it really makes me want to go on a vacation, out of the country. You know that feeling? New place, new food, everything just great. You know what I hate though? You finally get to your Airbnb after a long flight, kick your feet up, turn on Netflix, and your favorite show? Gone. Just not available in that country. Total buzzkill. But what if I told you with just one click, you can virtually change your location anywhere in the world? In fact, it's not just for travel. You're here in the US, but want to watch something that's only shown overseas? That's where today's video sponsor, Surfshark, comes in. I've watched The Office from start to finish 100 times over. I freaking love that show. So when Netflix removed it in 2021, I was crushed. But with Surfshark, I just switched my location to Canada, log in, and boom, it's back. No extra subscriptions, no drama. It's crazy how much content we're missing out without it. Click the link in the description to find out more about Surfshark and all the ways you can unblock streaming services. And it's not just streaming. Surfshark keeps your connection private and secure wherever you are by encrypting your online data. Using a VPN, it's like wearing pants. All the important stuff stays private and secure when you step your foot outside. Once your device connects to the internet, all the information is encrypted. That way, your online activity is hidden from all snoopers and trackers, especially if you're on public Wi-Fi or use different devices. One account works on unlimited devices, and they've even got a premium package called Surfshark One that combines all the features of the VPN with an antivirus, an ad-free private search tool, and alerts that notify you if your personal data has been breached. Go to surfshark.com/build50 or use code build50 at checkout to get 4 extra months off Surfshark VPN. Stay safe and get the content you want wherever you are. They even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so it's definitely worth a try. Thank you to Surfshark for giving me back my favorite show. Now let's get back to the video. I'm going to move on to the other bushings using this smaller stock. I think I have enough length to make all of them out of. So let's see how many times I mess up this time. And just like that, the lower control arm bushings are all done. You can see here, all bushings are fully machined. These are now fully complete. I gotta press the ball joints in, but now it's time to move on to the upper control arms. So initially I wasn't going to do these, but I figured since I'm already doing the lower control arms, I don't want to leave the upper control arms with the rubber bushings. I think I have just enough material to get those done. I'm actually going to be salvaging some of this scrap piece I made earlier. I think it's big enough to make those out of, but you guys have already seen enough machining for today, so let's cut to the final shot. And there we have it. All the front suspension parts are finally here and finally ready to be bolted back up in the car. This took way longer than I expected. I definitely underestimated how long it was going to take to machine all of these. I have the ball joints pressed in. Everything has been fully redone. I have all new hardware for every single joint. I was able to get a replacement camber bolt for one of the control arms, so I stripped those, zinc plated them. That's all set. I also have the aluminum custom coilover brackets in finally. So here's the clevis one. These came out amazing. The finish on them is just really, really nice. These are black anodized. Here's the clevis for the top mount. I have all the hardware for it as well, but these came out amazing. I'm really happy how these turned out. So now it's finally time to put all this back in the car. I also have some really cool stuff coming. I have new wheels, new tires, and I still have the brakes I want to do on this. But first, let's get all this stuff bolted up in the car and see how it all looks. This was the first time I mounted the actual aluminum brackets, and honestly, it had been so long since I had test fitted the 3D printed plastic ones, I'd forgotten how they looked. Now anodized and paired with all new hardware, they looked the part. Removing the upper control arms was a bit of a fight, nothing a little hammer persuasion couldn't solve. Out with the old and crusty, in with the new and shiny. Installing the new control arms and ball joints took some hammer love too, but everything went in without real trouble. Once torqued down, it was time to assemble the QA1 coilovers. These are super straightforward. First, I removed the eyelet being replaced by the new mount, threaded the jam nut and spring seat onto the body shock, and yes, I added anti-seize before the final install. Slid on the spring, added a touch of Loctite, then installed the top spring seat and clevis mount. Easy money. With the coilovers mounted up top, I let them hang until I could install the lower control arm. Here's how camber adjustment works in this car. The bolt is offset from the washer, so as the bolt turns and the washer spins in the cradle, it moves the arm in and out. But that's a job for later. Last step, bolt the lower coilover mount to the control arm, secure the ball joint to the knuckle, and after a few minutes of wrenching, everything was tight, clean, and ready to go. With the coilovers out of the way, I want to move to this next project I've been wanting to do for a very long time. And that's a big brake kit for the Marquette. I have here a set of Brembo calipers from a Jaguar XJR. These are 4-piston fixed calipers. And I actually made some adapter brackets, so these allow me to mount these Jaguar calipers onto the Marquette knuckle. And I designed the kit to work with these massive 15-inch rotors from my S197 GT500. So these are massive, but they're gonna fill the wheel well really nice. So I'm looking forward to these. And to make all this work, I have to use some spacers, and I'm gonna be converting to the Mustang hub so I can get the bolt pattern all working fine. I also have some extended studs, and because I already have these out of the car and they're used and they just look like shit, I'm gonna be rebuilding these. So I have seals, boots, I have all the new hardware, and as you can see back here, I have some brand new tires that I'm gonna be mounting. I have the wheels, but I'm gonna wait till the very end to show you guys what they look like. So let's go ahead and take these crusty old calipers to the basement and get them sandblasted. I think you guys have seen enough sandblasting for one video, so I'll spare you the trouble and cut the several hours of sandblasting into a quick 5-second clip. Here's how they look going in, and here's the stripped caliper version. It's amazing what a little sand and pressurized air can do. I also went ahead and gave them a bath in mineral spirits to make sure there wasn't any oils or sand left in the caliper. After a few minutes drying, I went ahead and taped off all the areas I don't want powdered and left the calipers in the oven for a few minutes to let them outgas. Here is the color I'm going to be going with. It is called Illusion Malbec. Now these Illusion powders spray a very dull matte color, but once you spray the clear, all the pigments come out. This is supposed to have a lot of reds and blues in it, so I'm looking forward to see what it looks like. The pictures I've seen online look amazing. I let the calipers bake in the oven for about 20 minutes, then left them outside until they were cool enough to powder. Unfortunately, I forgot to press record while I was spraying the color, so we're just going to skip straight to the powdered part. Alright, caliper is fresh off the oven with the powder. It just flashed and left it in there for about 2.5 minutes. This is not the actual finished color. It's a very dull purple. I'll let this cool all the way down, spray with clear, put it in the oven, and I'll show you guys the final result. The clear is the easiest powder to spray because you just go until you have a uniform white coat on the part. At this point, the caliper is ready to go in the oven for the final and full bake. And let me tell you, the color did not disappoint. Yeah. Woo. The calipers came out amazing. They pop so much in the sun, but in the shade, they turn into this like deep burgundy color. It's crazy how this color works. It's finally time to finish this up and bolt everything in the car. I have everything laid out here. I have my rotors, I have the brackets, the calipers, all the hardware for the pads, and I've also gone ahead and swapped out the studs on the hub. These are the extended hub because the kid, as I mentioned earlier, uses a hub spacer in between the rotor and the hub. So let's remove all the old crusty brakes from the car and swap in the fresh new Brembos. Michigan weather has not been good for these brakes. They were definitely due for an overhaul. The hubs on these cars are basically the same as the Mustangs, the only difference being the bolt pattern. Removing these is pretty straightforward, unless the inner bearing race gets stuck to the spindle. But a little bit of fire, prying and pulling, and it comes right off. After it got clean, the Mustang hub and bearing assembly slipped right in. Until it didn't, so I used some old bearing races and a mallet to get it to the finish line. The adapter brackets bolt up to the knuckle with some spacers in between to ensure the caliper will be centered with the rotor. The modified wheel spacer is then installed onto the hub, and then the rotor goes on, which I held down with the lug nut to make the caliper installation easier. Last but not least, the calipers can be bolted up to the adapter bracket before the pads and hardware are installed. And these are the wheels and tires I'm going with. Now these are your quintessential eBay wheel and tire package. These are Accelera tires. They're super cheap and they actually seem to have decent grip, at least based on the reviews. These are Aodhan, not really sure how to pronounce them, but they're FF7 wheels. These are in bronze. Obviously, I'm a sucker for bronze wheels, so I had to go with bronze, and I think it's gonna be a nice contrast with the brakes. These kind of are reminiscence of the FR500s. I didn't want FR500s on the Lincoln, so I went with something that had a similar style. These are 18-inch wheels, 8.5 in the front, 9.5 in the rear. And the tires, I have two 65/35s in the rear, two 35/40 in the front. And I'm gonna be honest, I am not so sure about the fitment of these. I've already tried them on and I thought I was gonna struggle with clearance because of the spacing of the wheels, but it looks like I actually have a ton of room. These tires have a much more round profile than I thought they were going to have, which is good, because that means now I probably could have gone with like a 275, even a 285. Same aspect ratio, that'll give me a much thicker sidewall. It'll fill up the wheel well a lot better. But I think these are still gonna look really good. They're gonna allow me to drop the car as much as possible to give it that nice stance. So I'm gonna bolt this up in the car and set it on the ground. All right, guys, here it is. The car is finally sitting on its own. Wheels, tires, brakes after 2 years. It came out amazing. I really like the fitment of the wheels, the tires. The brakes look great behind these bronze wheels. Can't go wrong with bronze wheels, like I always say. The car is looking amazing front to back, besides the paint job, obviously. Now it's time to take it out for a proper test drive. But before we do that, I want to do one last modification. As you can see, the engine bay has seen much better days. This thing is basically bone stock. I haven't done anything to the engine. I haven't even cleaned it since I bought the car. I do plan to put a turbo in this thing. Now, this is still supposed to be a budget, cheap car, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. I don't wanna break the bank with a turbo. I'm not even sure if I'm gonna build a bottom end. I'm just gonna slap a big turbo and see how fast I can go down the track. But before I do all that, I do have one thing that I think is going to transform this engine bay just like that. Let me show you. We've been working on something in the background for quite some time, trying to perfect the process, the materials, and we're finally happy with the results. And here they are, our very own V8 forged carbon coil covers. Now these coil covers are 100% carbon fiber. We originally made forged carbon coil covers for a V10 Continental and we loved the look. It transformed the engine bay. So we said, let's make a couple V8 ones, throw them on our engine, and then we figured, why don't we share with everyone else so they can also transform their own V8 engine bay. These are meant to replace your crusty and heavy aluminum coil covers from the factory. So not only do they look great, but for the purists out there, these are 0.7 pounds lighter than the aluminum coil covers. That means you can eat 3 McDonald's quarter pounders and still keep your ET. These are also designed to retain the stock gasket from the aluminum coil covers. So all you have to do is swap it over to the forged carbon coil covers, install it in your engine. Let's bolt these up in this car and transform that engine bay. There we go. Looks like $1,000 already. So now I really have to give this a proper wash, maybe paint the coil covers. I think if we had like blue or red, they'd pop a lot more, but that looks way better than these stock coil covers. So head over to shopbiy.com. Those are available on the website as of today. Get yourself a cool set of forged carbon coil covers. Let's close this up and take this for a spin. All right, we are back on the road. After 2 years, this car is finally on the road with the 6-speed manual transmission, with coilovers all around. And to be honest, it actually feels okay. I was a little worried the springs were gonna be a little too stiff, but it feels just fine. I mean, it's definitely a little tighter, you know, it's got that performance feel, but it still goes over bumps and, you know, potholes here in Michigan just fine. One thing I didn't really show on camera because it was just done under the car and it's just a pain in the ass to record. I actually finished up the exhaust, so I added some mufflers and the stock tips back in the car, and it's actually a lot quieter than I expected. Might have to change the mufflers to maybe something a little more loud. My freaking diesel Mercedes is louder than this thing, so I mean it's a nice cruising noise, but I don't know. I wish it was a little louder. It feels good to have this back on the road after so long. It literally has been over 2 years since I first put it on jack stands to do the suspension. It ripped pretty good. We gotta get out of here before we get in trouble. We're in Mexico, but still, you know, I didn't bring my Mexican insurance shirt, so there's only one thing left to do.
Hey man, where have you been? You ready to get to work? What the hell is this? What the hell was that?